Good morning. Let's see if this is going to work for me. Should have something saying that I've gone live. And nope, not yet. It is me there. Alright, so I need to edit this. Edit live video. That's not, I do not see an easy way of doing this. Good morning. Anyways, we're live, and thanks for joining up. I'm Rob, for those who don't know. The camera's right there. I've got my work camera set up over here to your left, and for being able to do video calls and meetings and stuff. And then I've got this camera set up for this, so I don't have to keep unplugging and swapping, which is this is the real thing. Ooh, cancel. I don't want to end the live video. This is not the test. This is the real thing. Okay. And I just want to see if there's anybody joining in. So, also get a chance to see, I'm trying to learn how to do this new setup. I'm simulcasting to Twitter, to Twitter, to Twitch, YouTube, and to Facebook. And so I'm very curious to see how this is all going to turn out. At this point, it is one of those interesting exercises for me as I get to flex some tech muscle for a change. And now we're going to get talking about music. I'm going to preview some work that I'm doing on this new piece. I already had this thing called Monster Chiller Horror Theater that was interesting. I'm still going to sort of, I've got the music here. Let's see if I can, I'll open it up just to, because I tend to work, I tend to come up with things in a scattershot fashion. So, you know, you'll have an idea, but sometimes it just doesn't quite, gel. So you end up trying this, trying that, and it's not as sort of stimulating at that moment as you thought it might be, and so you put it aside. But this is like this piano thing that it's sure enough, it's a little bit lame because it's just piano, but I'm doing something in 14/8, 7/8. And I wanted it to be kind of like Gentle Giant-y. So, using some interesting chord voicings for me. Sort of unresolved, suspended chords and things. And then what I wanted the guitar to do is like where it goes da ba ba da, like in between the piano. I want the guitar to sort of to have its thing on its own meter. So Gentle Giant. But I think it might be a little bit too fast at this moment. It doesn't feel, I don't feel very ta-da about it. And so I thought, well, let's just try something else. I have several pieces of this new, several ideas of this new thing that I want to sort of integrate. Pardon me. It's still allergy season here. in California, although it's starting to dry out. And then the dust season starts. So I'll let this load up. And the other bit is a lot more aggressive. Let's see what this is. Okay. I have to clean up. I've got a clavinet. I have my favorite VST of this holiday, of this season, of the COVID-19 season, is my Hammond BX3X, B3X. And I have my tempo track, and the tempo track editor will show you that this can be a little bit complex, and it's a little bit more hard driving, but it's incomplete. I have the beginning part laid out, and I'm just checking because I've got on the output channel, so I don't blow everybody away. I have the mastering tool set up with a compressor and limiter. So in order to be able to see if I can get yesterday I had a problem. The cat decided to jump around and got tangled up in some wires behind my monitor. She was in the window directly to your left, right behind you, and when she jumped down, she got caught up and flipped out a bit and unplugged a bunch of things. So I had to go and plug everything back in. Plus, I had set this up on a loop just to I can't remember why. Maybe it was just to see if I had any issues with distortion. It could have also been I was doing my test run through this yesterday to check why I'm not able to get direct desktop sound going through the desktop audio, or why I wasn't yesterday able to get desktop audio out to the stream. But it seems like a lot of stuff has been resolved, and you can hear my microphone fairly clearly, I hope. So let's see. So who do we have on right now? I think unfortunately it's telling me that, let's see, I have myself on because I'm monitoring the chat line, and I'm also making sure that everything looks okay online. So let's get started. So this is going to be part of Monster Chiller Horror Theater, and I'm also looking to do a little bit more with the very front end. It's this is the Zappa influence, was the vibraphones. Okay. So my idea is to go from here into this thing that's, let me see if I can remember it. I'm definitely going to sort of mellow out in terms of the, it's not going to be so, it's not going to be so frenetic. Let's just say that. And why is this still seem like it's not very, okay, so, gotta remember. I need to remember what was the, I'll be back. I wrote it down. I didn't write it down. It was an interesting, it's a very interesting progression. Hang on. Trouble in the house. What? Thomas is coming. So, this is actually going to be like the most interesting part of the song, if I can remember it entirely. This is. Oh. Na 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 na. Okay. I think that's it. Maybe not that exact combination, but let's see. I'll figure it out. I was playing with it on Friday night. I was playing with it a lot. And it was a very interesting thing. But it's going to alternate between this, like, and it's the pedal tones. The pedal tone is my left hand, you know, like the interesting thing about, and I've heard this from bass players. My friend Mark Miller, was the one who very much pointed it out. The first guy that I actually know who actually pointed it out explicitly to me. It's not like whatever chord I'm playing, he can change that chord just by whatever note that he chooses to play in accompaniment with it. And while it's probably very eminently obvious to, you know, people who are educated, who are actually educated in music, as opposed to me, who is self-taught, the reality of it is like, wow, that's actually a pretty powerful concept. So I, you know, I've used it without actually knowing that, without knowing the fact, but instinctively sort of saying, okay, this sounds good. So in the case of, let's go to the, you know, let's take it to this, like, to this chord, which is my A sus4, A sus2. A sus2 down to the E minor 7. I can do this. essentially, which is the E minor 7th. But if I play the on the bass, if the bass goes down to a G, I'm actually turning it into a G. G6, G major 6, because I've got this the E, which is the 6th of the major scale, and then I'm adding the lower G, the octave down on top of that. Definitely makes the chord a different chord. Similarly with if I stick on the G, I'm making that A suspended 6th, the A6 chord into a G2, and then 6, G2, 6, that's the same, G2, 6, and then the B is another 2, no, that's the natural third. Anyway, you could even say 6/9, G6/9, which is probably more accurate because the 9 is an octave above. You can see I struggle with theory. I like big, full, rich chords. I like lots of suspended. I like the sound of it, and I'm teaching my almost 11-year-old about he does not want to take piano lessons. So, but we got a free grand piano. Somebody was desperate to give it away, and so we took it. Little did we know what we actually got. It needs work, but it's functional. Anyway, I'm teaching him about majors and minors, and we started off with the C major scale, and then I'm showing him the C minor, and and going through the theory, assigning numbers to the scale, and so anyways, I like a lot of open chords, but in the rock context, putting a lot of distortion or a lot of effects on a lot of overdrive effect on an open chord sounds pretty nasty. There's lots of modulation that goes on and makes it sound pretty cluttered. So I tend to use like a slightly under distorted sound, except when I'm just doing single notes or power chords. Anyways, for this piano, then of course there's a lot of things that there's a lot of songs. There's Boomtown Rats. Do do do. Do do do. Anyway, I've sort of started playing with this, and I just can't remember what my left hand was doing. But it's going to vamp between these. There's a 5-chord sort of progression. It's going to vamp on the first two where the left hand moves, and then it'll go down a full note, like a full tone, and do the same thing, and then it resolves to a C sharp add 9. Add chord I knew, but it's a C. It's kind of strange because it goes chromatically, if I remember correctly. That's essentially what the bass notes, the root bass notes are. What, sweetie?
Do we have waffles?
Yeah, can you go look in the garage fridge? Yeah, and you should put some shorts and a t-shirt on. I know it's Sunday, but...
What?
Anyway, that's my youngest son. And I'm also hoping next week, as I keep on adding new features, to this broadcast. I've got this old Microsoft camera, webcam that has sort of gone, of course, by the wayside. But I wanted to be able to set it up to be able to have a close-up keyboard. Okay, so getting back to this. So it's the rest of the song is going to have this interesting sort of piano thing going on, and I'm going to have the rhythm section. Sort of, they're going to be tied to a vocal, an interesting sort of vocal. Let's see if I can. Let's see. Of course, my typing isn't all the greatest. I'm going to look for. I don't want to have anybody see what I'm typing here. Let's see if I can. Let's see if I can find it. But I'm going to use essentially. Going to use Japanese. A pair of Japanese girls talking to each other, like on the phone or in conversation, and that will be that will drive the meter and the notes that are being played. So the vamp is the sort of the groove, and the vamp is going to be in this sort of jazz thing that's going on. And then there's going to be the two girls talking to each other, and personally I don't understand Japanese, so that's what makes it kind of interesting, is to be able to then sit down and analyze the phonetics of it and play notes that sort of go along with the pitch of the voice and maybe some of the context, and have the keyboard solo drive one girl's language talk, what she's saying, her contribution to the conversation, and the other girl is guitar. So it's very, very interesting, and so I think it's going to be really entertaining and really funny, but at the same time not just entertaining and funny, but also really musically challenging, technically challenging from a perspective of playing. And I'm even considering, actually, like, now, if I can't sort of talk to the person who I've asked if they could contribute to this, if we can't sort of come to an agreement with it about it, and they can't do it, then I was considering having my son Thomas, who's absolutely a great guitar player himself, my 17-year-old son, be able to trade off licks using this, like, in the same fashion. So one girl is me, the other girl is Thomas, and we're playing and trading licks off, and it would be his debut on a recording, except for he did some vocal stuff when he was much younger. He contributed his voice to the last album before this, to A Fine Line Between. And you hear him sort of in the distance as the story of the character Ben, whose child died in utero, and so he's, he hasn't been quite right since, and the child's voice is constantly calling to him, look at me. So it's a horror story. Anyways, that's the plan for this, and then eventually it'll come back to where I think that I can exit out of the Chinese sort of speaking, because it's got those really open and wide interval sort of notes and things going on the piano. I can exit out into the gentle giant section and fade out from there. So the whole thing is going to be about 5 to 6 to 7 minutes long. I don't know. I mean, it depends on if we get the guy that I'm talking to, a really well-known keyboard player, and if it's something that's really fertile, like if it's something it's turning out to be something really, really interesting. You also don't want to. Conversations don't only last 3-4 minutes. You want to see, like, you want to have a natural progression of the conversation, so that somebody who actually understands will be listening to the conversation and will actually sense there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. So very very challenging from a compositional perspective for myself. So, and that will be the last piece for this album that I'm working on. So, let's see. What else can I show you? What else can I bring up here? I was gonna play some sort of sample of Japanese girls talking to each other. When I go and do a search of that, it can be kind of nasty. So, I'm not going to play nasty stuff. Totally ugly, nasty stuff. But let's take a look at something else. So let's maybe even look at let's bring this up. This is sort of a two-part piece that was Hypnotic, Ashes for Tears. So Hypnotic, it's working titles. Most of the stuff until it gets actual lyrics put to it is a working title, but Ashes for Tears is such a compelling, interesting title. Again, it's kind of like stream of consciousness kind of stuff. When you do your project naming, it's such a compelling, interesting visual behind that's actually starting to drive a lot of the thought process in terms of writing. What's going on? Why don't I have? There we go. Okay. So this one is actually quite sparse in terms of its instrumentation. I've sort of taken that as a theme this time to say I want it to be more like a classic recording session. The number of tracks, I know Frank Zappa was like the first one to record on the 16-track studio and used every track, and they still bounced and did stuff, but it was like, it's the option, the nice thing about Cubase and a lot of the existing DAWs is, especially I'm using Cubase Pro 10.5, I have unlimited tracks. But unless you're actually doing something to contribute, if you're just layering to make it thicker and sound bigger, it actually makes it sound smaller. So doubling up guitars oftentimes will just make the sound of the piece sound smaller instead of making it sound bigger. And the aim of a lot of my productions these days is to capture the essence, without sounding too artsy fartsy. But you don't want to end up filling things up and you miss the nuances. I think that in a lot of the past recordings I've done, that's kind of what happened. You get very excited, or you think like, oh, this lead solo, this lead synth solo isn't powerful enough. It's not cutting through, and so I want to. You end up doubling it up. So I was doing a lot of like silly things, like taking my V-synth, which I used to have a V-synth. It was the first generation V-synth with the V2 update on it, and I used to take that and I'd stack it with what I had at the time was a Moog Little Fatty. And I'd stack it, and it would sound fantastic, counterintuitive. Like I'm telling you that so it would sound great, and then when you put it together with everything else. You end up with just a glob of sound. And so when I went back to do the remix, it was addition through subtraction, which is difficult. Anyways, so the aim in this one is you don't, I'm not looking to simply just add parts to, I don't want a whole bunch of parts all at the same time. I don't want to stack things together. I want to use the instruments for very specific purposes. So I have this, an absinthe pad, which sounds really nice, separate. This has got to be. I'm using some Contacts Heaviosity patches, which are really nice. And Petco called me back. I guess I'm due for my grooming. And then I've got the Evil Choirs, which are the Mellotron, courtesy of Arturia, and then the same amazing sounding B3 from IK Multimedia. So, I'm not using a lot of synths on here. Although, when you look from the perspective of a 1970s production, that is actually pretty big. Again, 16 tracks. How many synths did Rick Wakeman use on Close to the Edge? I think there were 2 mini Moogs, a Mellotron, and I don't think he had. Oh, there was a clavinet, Mellotron, the organ, the 2 mini Moogs, and I think that's it. Because he expanded it to go to do 6Ys after that, a little bit, but not much. So here, this is this tune called, and and this is my, for anybody who doesn't recognize, this is my NST guitar, new standard tuning. It is tuned to fifths, so starting at the low C, which is just a little bit above what a standard 7-string would be. So it starts at the low C, goes to a G, goes to a D, A, E, and because it gets too, the strings are too thin to support going to a full fifth, it's a minor third to the G. But it sounds pretty nice. Anyways, this was the first I started messing around and started coming up with some really cool You can do a lot with this, because something like this, that's an add 9 chord, like a C add 9, G add 9, A add 9. And so you can do like, let's see, if I was to do snake message in a bottle. I could just play it with one finger as opposed to having to do these magnificent diffuse stretches. Just have to remember what fret you're going on. That sounds really nice as it is. You know, let's listen to it. This was like just some messing around on this guitar for a little while, enjoying just this whole new. And anytime you're sort of thrown into an unfamiliar tuning like this is, even though it's essentially mandolin tuning or violin tuning. Violin tuning would be taking the D, A, E, and going up to the high B. Yes, the high B. That would be your violin, and your mandolin. This is essentially, or viola is like viola tuning, and putting it on a guitar and then trying to sort of play with it. It's an interesting twist, sort of twist to your neurons to make that happen. But here it is. This is essentially like the very first day I came back, started messing around with it, and it turned into something that like I thought I would record and keep. And so this is what this is. So I'm running the guitar through this Leslie emulation. So, for your interest's sake, the guitar is being run through a Leslie emulation, which is the VB3 Mark II rotary speaker. VB3 being it's a VST that is done by GSI, that's out of Italy. I was using the VB3 for a lot because IK didn't come out with their version of the Hammond until just earlier this year, and so I was using the VB3. It was sufficient. It was really good. It was the best thing at the time, and but the problem I had with it was it just wasn't cutting through. It wasn't cutting through the mix, and which also drove the idea of making it a little bit more sparse. So this has got on here. This has got this Absinthe 5 pad. I really love the Absinthe. The Absinthe is this. I've been using Absinthe since 2004. It's a Native Instruments synth since the very early versions of it. It has some fantastic patches on it, and this is this sort of evolutionary pad that's on. So the next that's sitting in the background. I've also got I've used the bass guitar just to on the opening notes, just to add that sort of heft to it. So this is the guitar is all clean. So this is something I'm going to have to fix because it's I might have to just put graphite powder. I've tried nut grease, the nut grease, but it's not doing its job. I might have to do the graphite powder, and graphite powder is pretty messy. But it's essentially this. Anytime I use that's the problem with the tremolo. Anytime I use the tremolo unit, it gets bound up there, and then I have to do this retuning, which is a drag because I'd love to be able to hold and shimmy it and have it come back to like true tuning. So it's just essentially almost like Soundgarden's Spoonman. You can tell him. I'm a little bit more fluent with it now than I was back then. So that sounded really cool, and I was going to go back to what can we do now after this? Next, the next thing that came was this next bit. So I wanted to make it very much heavier, very much more tool-like. So. I think I may have covered this once before. I borrowed the time signatures from Schism, or is it? I borrowed it from a Tool song, and it was because it was very interesting. It's like it's 98988878. So like 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 1 2 3 1 2 3. So that's 8, and then 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. Okay, so the drum pattern does this sort of repeating thing. And then it goes into a 5/4. And I do. My intent was to have the bass guitar playing a variation of the riff. Yeah. You can come in though.
Where's your
What are you gonna do with that?
undrilled and waterproof? My mom.
Why? Okay. Just you don't need to do that right now, do you? You can do that after this. You're gonna move all the other furniture around, but
Yeah.
you can. Then the monitors can.
Because I'm putting my bed where the monitor is. Can I have those screwdrivers? Also, do you know where the drill is at?
They're in the garage. You'll need help. Just to say. Okay. That was my son. So, anyways, simple enough. The bass is like. Doing whatever I came up with, which was an interesting little bass line that sits in 5, which is of course 10/8. So if I'm doing everything in, if I set everything up in 8, then that means like I've got 7/8, 8/8, 9/8, 10/8. We get past this section, which is going to have lyrics, and we hit this. And it becomes instead of just a power sort of chord based riff, it becomes a minor. I'm going to redo that, obviously. And there's the B3. And that's it. So yeah, it's a bit of an exercise, but I thought it was sort of compelling enough to record. Other people, I know Sean, my friend Sean Fairchild from Seattle is I've got him slated to play his version of the bass guitar on here. And again, I'm giving everybody this sort of open license to be able to do what they will. I think that we'll find out what his results are going to be, and then I'm asking Thomas Lang to play drums on this, because I think he would just totally twist and knock it out of the park. So that's essentially the piece. It was an interesting exercise. This was recorded, I think it was a year ago, April. So yeah, I just picked this up. I just had picked this up, and the reason why the thing binds. So I've got this Stets bar on here. Stets bar is a really interesting system, because as you move if you take a look at I'm kind of looking at the monitor to see, if you take a look at the bridge, as I move this, the bridge actually moves as you push the bar down. So, and then, the guy that I took this to before I put the Stets bar on, did a fabulous job of refretting the neck with these sort of gold colored fret wire that I really love. Decided to go, even though this is a crappy, and destroyed, beat up old Craigslist acquisition, it's an old enough Epiphone that as an Epiphone, it's one of the better ones. It's one of the really good ones, actually. This was early Korean made, so everything is solid, and it was even though it's a factory second on top of that, it's a fantastic instrument. So paid the money, put it on the. I think it was like all of like $250 to put the to do the refretting, which was a fantastic price, and cut a new nut. Because the Stets bar wasn't there, he cut the nut, and it still binds a little bit. So I'm gonna have to put graphite powder into the nut to really make it slick for when I use the Stets bar, and it'll return. Because I did put on locking tuners. I'm pointing to the wrong cannon. I did put on locking tuners for this, and so everything should be returning back to pitch 0, but it's not. And finally, folks, we're at the end. This is, I'm hoping to be able to show off some new pieces for what would be the follow-up work for this follow-up for this album. There's some pieces that were originally intended for the Onion sort of reproduction, but in fact I'll bring one up here if I can find it in this list. It's In Memory, Postscript, Dreamscape, Runaway. So Runaway was a tune that was on the Onion album, which was it wasn't really an album. It was my first release, but it was when mp3.com existed, which was the original venue for unsigned artists, and I saw that was, I think, the first time I experienced Spock's Beard was when they posted a couple of the tunes from it was V from 5. There was the big vocal tune that totally destroyed me, because it was the first time I'd heard of anything that was, I'd heard Gentle Giant, and a lot of the vocal stuff that they did was a little bit too out there for me when I was younger, and but Spock's Beard did their piece. All We Are is blah blah blah. Babel. It has to be Babel. Anyways, I heard that piece and I was like, oh geez. And so then of course I ran out and bought all the albums, and then and I started posting my stuff. I posted I think the original version of Hate Fuck was up there. That's now been expanded into Foucault's Pendulum. And it was received positively. So I did a bunch of other songs. I released them there, but I also then I burned a CD and took them home to Canada to give away to my friends, and didn't really think it was actually anything that was going to come of it. But it, it had very interesting moments. And when I did Sound of Thoughts, like 4 years later, when I released 4 or 5, it was 2006 when I originally released the Sound of Thoughts. People were asking about earlier music. I didn't have anything published except because mp3.com, and so I've always had it in my back burner to go and redo it. And of course now with 20 years having gone by, I want to do it right. So I'm starting to work on it. And this is now one of the songs called Runaway. So anyways, that's this piece. So that's what's coming out. One of the things coming out on the next album. It's not going to be nearly as wide-ranging and sweeping and big and glumpy as this one has been. But thanks for joining us today. Joining me today. It's been a slice. It's after 12. I've always seemed to go a little bit over. It's after 12 on the West Coast, and I just wanted to thank you for coming on and watching and listening. And we'll see you next week. Stay safe. Stay happy. Let's remember that let's remember Black Lives Matter, not because they're the only lives that matter, but because they're the ones that are right now that are being the most persecuted, with the only reason being the pigmentation of the skin. So please support that as much as you can, and whether it's to go march or to spread the word or to correct people when they think that the all lives matter is while it's a truism, it minimizes the particular plight of the people who are black and the kinds of problems, endemic racism that they're experiencing and have experienced for years and years and years. So just remember, be sensitive to that, and stay healthy. Don't get sick. The coronavirus rates are going up, and because of all the us deviating from the social distancing that we've been doing, and they're a lot worse. The disease is a lot worse than everybody thinks, than a lot of the lay people think, and we'll just we really need to get that out of the way. So thanks a lot. We'll see you again next week. Stay healthy. Love your brother, and have a great